Hey everybody, so today we're going to make some soup bowl cozies. The first thing we want to do is apply some fabric to our fabric mat and go ahead and put it into our Cricut Maker so that the pattern can be cut out. You're going to do this with both color choices of fabric as well as your batting. So your first piece of fabric, when you're done with that, remove the mat, go ahead and remove the piece that has been cut out from the mat. And you should, when you're using the fabric mat, I have a pair of tweezers that is specifically for my fabric mat so I can avoid touching the mat as much as possible. I believe it can be cleaned off, but I like to try to prolong it as long as I can. Then we'll place our second fabric choice onto the mat and go ahead and make sure it's adhered firmly. And this brayer tool is really a lifesaver and can really get things stuck to your mat, not only your fabric mat, but your other mats as well. I'm so glad that I purchased this. It's one of the best items I think that I've purchased, and I highly recommend it. So we're going to go ahead and cut out that piece as well and then remove it from the mat. So we should have two pieces of fabric that are exactly the same size and shape, and that's all we need for this soup bowl cozy. Then once these pieces of fabric are cut out, we are going to cut out our batting. And I actually, instead of using the fabric mat, I like to use a regular mat with some transfer tape placed on it with the sticky side of the transfer tape up. This is so that I don't have to get all that fuzziness all over my fabric mat, and I can just, it'll be on the transfer tape instead of my mat, and it works out really well. Now when I cut this one out, when I was doing this video, I put it in my Cricut Maker and hit go, and I completely forgot to change the setting from cotton, which I was cutting previously with the two patterned pieces of fabric that I had. And so I cut it on the cotton setting. It still worked out great. I mean, I could have changed it to there is a setting in Design Space for cutting out batting, so you can see that there are a couple of little spots that didn't cut all the way through, but it's still cut pretty good. So, and it's not a big deal if some of it tears just a little bit. It's going to be on the inside, no one's going to see it. So go ahead and remove that from your mat, and you can see that it comes up nicely, and all of that fuzziness that would be on your fabric mat is now on that transfer tape. The next thing we're going to do is sew directly down the center of each flower end from one end to the other. So we're going to go ahead and place that into our sewing machine, and starting at one tip of the flower petal side, we're going to sew directly across down the middle all the way over to the other side. Now you can pin your pieces of fabric together, and I do recommend you do that, but I'm kind of a lazy crafter if you've seen me do any of my things, so you know that I tend to skip that step. But I do recommend pinning your pieces together if you want them to remain in exactly the right place. So after you've done one side, you just turn it and then go ahead and sew from the center of one all the way across to the center of the other flower petal. And we're going to do that with our second piece as well. So you should have two pieces of fabric that you cut out, and you're going to sew from the center of each petal to the other side on both pieces of fabric. Now in this tutorial, I am using two pieces of batting, one for each fabric that I cut out. However, I found that when I only use one piece of batting, it works just as well in the microwave, and it's less bulky when I go to sew everything together. So I actually prefer to use only one piece of batting instead of putting a piece attached to each of the patterns of fabric. So what I would have done is just attach the batting to the red piece that I've already done, and then this one I would not have batting on and simply just sew. I still want to have that pattern down the middle, so I would just sew from one end to the other. Then we're going to sew our corners. So you're going to flip up your fabric, make sure the right sides touch, and we're going to sew the corners together because that's going to give us our stability for our bowl holder. So you can see that you're going to sew the bottom corners on each side, and then we're going to flip it again in half the other way and do the exact same thing. So you're going to again flip it in half, but this time the other direction, and we're going to sew those bottom corner pieces together again. So once we've done that, we should have what now looks like our basic structure for our soup bowl cozy. And you're going to do both pieces of fabric the exact same way, and then you're going to go ahead and turn one so that the right side of the fabric is facing up, and then turn the other one so the right side of the fabric is facing down, and place them together with the right sides together. And you're going to go ahead and sew all the way around the edges, leaving about a 1/4 inch space around, and make sure that you leave an opening so that you can turn it inside out. The larger the opening you leave, the easier it's going to be. So you can see I've sewn all the way around the edges here. My sewing is not that great, but if you take your time, you should be able to get nice clean edges. The larger the opening you leave, the easier it's going to be to flip this inside out. I tend to get a little carried away, and then my openings end up being kind of small, but it still works. Flip it inside out so that the right sides are now facing out, and you want to make sure that once you get everything pulled through the opening and everything is flipped out the right way, that you work on getting the corners completely pushed through. So I tend to start just doing that with my fingers and working through the fabric so that I get the corners pushed out all the way, and then start to shape my bowl shape. Once I have that done, just a rough shaping with my fingers. And once I have that rough shape done and I'm starting to see my bowl kind of come together, my bowl cozy, and then I'll go back in, and you can use a chopstick, you can use the end of a wooden spoon. I happen to just have a paintbrush handle on hand. I didn't know where my little wooden dowel went, so I just grabbed a little paintbrush. And I'm going to go back in that opening and really work on those corners and make sure they're nice and crisp, and everything's pushed out fully so that I get some cleaner lines as I'm going around. And this is, I guess, preference, so you could do that as much as you want, and then you can just do a little trial run and kind of see how your bowl's going to fit in there, but it should fit any size bowls. Really, you just want the bottom, the base of the bowl, and a little bit up the side covered so that when you're sticking it in the microwave, you're not burning your hands. Then we're going to tuck the inside of that flap that we left open and go ahead and top stitch all the way around, and you're done, and you're ready to go ahead and stick it in the microwave and enjoy your soup bowl cozy that should now protect your hands from getting burned. Enjoy!